Chat is up. I think that's working. Anyway, okay, so we were playing around with the new features of ZBrush 2023.1. If you want to know more about that, I guess you can go to playlist 2023 what's new. I suppose that's got everything in it. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, stencil, drop 3D, etc., etc. There was some cool stuff. I don't know if it's cool, but I wanted to test real quick. So when we go to create, if y'all remember, let's grab a sphere out of our canvas or out of our tool. Ooh, boy. Come on, Mike. I got a terrible sleep on my stream weeks. I don't know what that is, but let's see if I can get my brain to work. So we're grabbing a sphere out of our tool palette, and we have a sphere, and we're going to say make polymesh 3D, and we can now sculpt on this. I'm going to go into X symmetry here, and we're going to start sculpting. There we go. And so, for example, if I go in here to my comma key, and we go, well, actually, I don't need to do that. Just hit B. Let's go to C, and there's like chisel organic, chisel creature, chisel 3D, etc., etc. These are vector displacement alphas. So if you want to know more about that, I'm just going to type in VDM or vector displacement hard surface VDM project. Yeah, I got some stuff on there. So there's some vector displacement alpha stuff on there. Basically what it is it can have undercuts. So if we go through here, where's the one with hold on, B, chisel organic. Come on, give it a second to load up. There we go. There's some really obvious, oh boy, here's one. Here's one like teeth. So when you drag this, oh boy. First of all, you're gonna need enough resolution for this to come through. So I'm gonna hit Control Z, Control D a couple times, which is of course geometry divide. And then as I drag this out, you're gonna see not only is it an alpha, there's also the ability to do underhangs. And you can also do like hard surface. So here's, you can go through here, and you don't have to do drag rect. You can go through here and you can say, hell, you could do spray stroke if you wanted to, but maybe like a line here, and then we can go through here and say, let's try that again. Let's go in here to stroke, lazy mouse, lazy step way up. There we go. So you can change your lazy step, and you can go and you can drag out these VDMs, and of course they are alphas that have underhangs and are just a little bit more robust than a plain old alpha. However, sometimes it's hard to project hard surface shapes through alpha, but now with the new like this type of stuff here, and in fact I feel like there's a brush. Am I just missing it? Chisel 3D, chisel shapes. This might be it. It's kind of difficult to kind of project these types of shapes through here. Basically what you'd have to do, I guess we can do it. So to set up a VDM, there is if I hit the comma key, hey everybody, John Yu, Anna March. Yeah, I'm back in spirit. I don't know if my brain's back yet. We'll see. Actually, it's not. So we'll just keep moving. So there is under demo projects, there's miscellaneous. And then in miscellaneous, there is a brush 3D templates. I think it's these things. I could be wrong. Anyway, there may be templates in here for you to kind of set up a VDM. I feel like it's that, but I really don't know. However, you can also simply go over here and grab a plain 3D, drag it on your canvas, go into edit mode, make polymesh 3D, turn on your polyframe, and we can see that this is a piece of geometry that we can go in here to say geometry reconstruct back all the way to where it's just a single plane. And you can use this as your vector displacement alpha. We want to keep our edges sharp, so I'm going to go ahead and say turn off the smooth modifier, hit Control D up to maybe 1,000,000 polygons here. And then of course you can sculpt any shape in here that you want. What you could do to project a shape is you could say, okay, I want to append that was like a pill shape. So let's grab I'm going to append a sphere here. I'm going to scale it, scale the sphere down, select it, and then go in here maybe to your extender. There we go. And pull this out. And then we could project this through, I think by going in here, and we could try doing like a project all and see what that picked up and try to play around with these settings, or you can go in here and control tap these points in history. In fact, let's say Control D just to smooth that out. Control tap those points in history, then come back here and do like a history, project history. It's under your project menu. In this case, what we'd probably have to do is go in here and say BHR history recall brush and just go through here and try and sculpt this out. Essentially is go in here and blah, 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 and then smooth it out and then get it to sculpt back up. You don't have to stay in the highest subdivision level. You can drop it down to like subdivision level 7 or something like that to make it a little more reasonable. So you'd basically go through here and try to very carefully project a shape through, and it's generally just a pain in the butt. So now, but let's try this. This was a comment on one of my YouTube videos that I caught. I don't catch all of them by any stretch of the imagination, so I apologize if you've said something that I should respond to and I haven't. But this did catch my eye, whereas we could go in here to a vector displacement plane that we want to sculpt a hard surface shape on, and we can use drop 3D functionality for that. So for example, we have this mesh that exists. I'm just going to hit clone, so it's kind of sitting just out in our tool palette here. And then this we don't need anymore. So we have our plane sitting here. So now let's go into document, drop 3D. And now this is where we can go in here and we can say, okay, like a single layer brush, and I'm going to keep that stroke. You can just kind of go in here and just draw. It's not really sculpting yet. You got to go and pick it up. However, when I do pick this up, and by pick up I mean hit drop 3D, it'll mask what we haven't changed. However, because we have subdivision history, it doesn't want to break that. If we didn't have subdivision history, it would go through and locally subdivide to maintain the detail that we've put in our shape. But because we do have subdivision history, it will keep it, and that's really good for vector displacement because you have to have that relationship between subdivision level 1, which is just a square or just a plane, and then all the way up to your final. So let's use that to our advantage possibly. So having said that, we'll go back here, we'll go back into drop 3D. That puts us in a temporary 2.5D mode. We can't rotate the camera or anything. Oh no. Testing. It should be showing. Let me see. Got my PAV stream, video capture device, image, display capture. Anybody else having a hard time? I don't know exactly where that's streaming. Ooh, Twitch. I wonder if my Twitch is busted for some reason. You know what? The one I need to work, I mean, Twitch should work too, but let me see. Yeah. I don't know why. I don't know why that would be happening. Maybe I need to reconfigure. Okay, so we've temporarily drop 3D'd this, so it's just a 2.5D version of our object. We can't rotate around, but we can do some really cool stuff. One of the cool things we can do, like we were talking about, is we can change this alpha. We have the single layer brush. I'm going to change this to like the line stroke. We can just drag this across, and you can hit W, Shift S to make a copy or do a snapshot, and then you can move this copy out. You can set this to like Z from Z add to Z sub. You can change the Z intensity on the fly, so it's pretty robust. And then you can hit Q to go back into draw mode. You can switch this over to like a grid stroke or a radial stroke, and of course swap out your alphas. This line is cool too. If you go in here and change your spacing up, you can kind of space out your alphas like this. So a lot of really cool stuff you can do. However, you can also, instead of doing this, you can say, hey, I don't want to do a single layer brush. I want to have an actual piece of geometry. So for example, a Polymesh 3D star, you can just drag that out on your canvas. And in this case, we have drag rack. But of course, if you want to change that, change it to line. Did it keep our, yeah, kept our spacing. So you can drag out multiple lines. You can drag out radial shapes. You can drag out grid shapes, blah, blah, blah. You get that, you get the idea. So when we're done with this, we can uncheck drop 3D. And again, that will go through and project those shapes for us. Now, in this instance, it's not going to do any fancy undercut stuff because this is truly just an alpha that we're applying to our plane. But if you wanted some hard surface shapes that were based on an object that might be difficult to project through manually, this would be a great way to do it. So let's try our little pill shape. And let's also try to do, yeah, so let's grab our pill shape. Nope. let's keep our plane here, go into drop 3D mode, grab our pill shape, and then we're just going to, yeah, we'll drag rect this out here. So here is our pill shape, and let's do this. And another cool thing you can do is, again, because we're in drop 3D mode and we can move this around, we can hit W and we can move it before we drop it. We can scale and rotate it before we drop it. You can do a snapshot. So we can do like Shift S and move this one over, and E to go in here to scale mode, scale it down. And oh, and another thing too, if you want to, you can raise or lower it through the mesh here just by clicking and dragging over here with move mode activated. So we can kind of sink this one down a little bit. And then if I want to drag out another copy or another shape, let's go, we have a sphere here. So we can say, you know what, let's grab, well, we can grab any of these. We can grab a ring, a sphere. Let's grab a sphere. And then when I drag a sphere out, maybe I want to go in here to Z sub and then hit W, and then I can go through here and I can make this more or less embedded. So you can go through here again, grab more shapes, Shift S, we'll move this down, move, scale, rotate, whatever you want to do. And you know, we'll set this to Z add, and then we'll shrink, we'll sink that down into our object. So once we're done playing with this, or maybe we want to go in here to our single layer brush and again set that back to line. And again, have fun with these alphas. If you do a really soft alpha, you'll get a really soft line. Let's go ahead and do Z add, fairly intense here. So simple brush, single layer brush, Z add, MRGB off. You can also poly paint with this if you wanted to. I don't know. Oh, dot stroke. What did I do? Oh, you know what? I wonder. Yeah, single layer work down here. Let's switch this back. Let's switch this over to the simple brush, and we'll say line stroke. So with a soft alpha here. That doesn't look great. Let me see, line spacing. Line. Let's change that spacing way down. Oop, I guess this one you change the spacing up. The intensity down. Here's what we can do. We can say, go out of drop 3D mode. There we go. We've projected our cool shapes through here. I think it worked pretty well. I'm gonna go back into drop 3D mode so I can use my single layer brush because I like that way better. And then we can go through here. There we go. So we'll switch this back to line, and then I can go through here. There we go. So we have this functionality. Let's go crank up that Z intensity so we can again do a soft fall off alpha. That'll give you that kind of look, or you can go in here with a very harsh, like alpha 58, and go through here, make a very harsh alpha. Let's say alpha 06. We'll go through here and say, put a little line on here, and yeah, we'll put a little line here, and then we'll switch that to Z sub, W, Shift S, and we'll scooch this over. Okay, so that's how you can get that to work. Okay, we got our hard surface stuff. We'll do out of drop 3D mode, and then now we have a vector displacement plane. So if I wanted to add this to, so let's go in here to B, you know, we'll add it to our chisel rectangle brush, and I'm going to go in here to, let's see if I remember how to do this, brush from mesh. That'll go ahead and add this geometry here, so it's actually going to cycle through and create a VDM alpha, which you can see these are just regular alphas. They just go straight back. This is a vector displacement alpha. There's no undercuts, so it's not like you need it, but we do have that shape now, so we can go through here and just go back to our sphere, and now we have a nice hard surface vector displacement alpha. Whew, okay. I'm doing good. Yeah, a little bit of the new tools. We'll actually play a little bit with maybe, I don't have an agenda today, by the way. Sometimes I come on here and I want to make something specific. Not today, so bring your questions, or I can just ramble, which is what I usually do. Drop 30 is here. So you feel like you use regular brush, the alpha insert mesh would be easier. Yeah, I don't. What I do like about it though is, for example, oh, I got a good example. Maybe let's go in here to what would it be called? Intro sample files. Bird robot steps. So anything that I've So here's the old, you know, kind of gross concept. You're just kind of getting your idea out in the round really quickly, and then you can go down here. So that's a block out. Here it is, refined a little bit, again just keeping it loose. If you go way back here, you can start seeing like, okay, I can see the shapes and I can kind of understand what's going on. But of course when you come in here, it's really not all that refined. It's just a bunch of stuff kind of laid out. So then we go through here and we do a little bit of separation and refining the form, and then finally the final concept, which again, you know, from here it looks like, oh, is that a hard surface mesh? And in reality, no, not really. It's just a concept. It's a really quick idea. However, if I wanted to go through here, and generally speaking, when I'm doing this type of work, I'm decimating it down. So this here is like 6 million points. So if I go through here and grab this, just to make it more usable, I'm going to say split hidden. This is just kind of this is like a demo. So it's not the actual file, but what we can do is I can play around with this file. Whoops. We'll grab this file again, but I'm going to, just for an example, I'm going to grab this here. We're going to say split hidden, and we'll talk about, in fact, I'm just going to work on one X symmetry. That'll be even more performant. I'm going to say delete hidden. If it's just going to be a mirrored object, then if you're going to do a mirrored object, make sure you don't do text, because mirroring text doesn't work that well. So for example, we have this object, and it's it's not tessellated, it's decimated down, just to make it a little bit more performant. So if I wanted to go through here and be like, okay, I want to continue modifying this with some alphas, you know, we got some cool alphas, so we'll go in here to our B chisel rect, and we're going to go through here and, you know, drag this out. What you could do is you could come in here and be like, okay, let me just subdivide the entire thing. And that seems to be like when a lot of people come into ZBrush, it's, I'm going to do my block out in Maya or Max Maya Moto Blender Cinema 4D. Come into ZBrush, and I'm going to hit the subdivide key 80 times just to get 5 million polygons, 10 million polygons, and then I'm going to come in here and do this, make a little alpha. Instead of doing that, what you could do now is bring in your object, and what you could have done, not always, but you know, ever since this was introduced, you can go in here to activate Sculptris Pro mode, and we're going to say Z intensity down to 0. I'm holding down Shift, by the way. Hold down Shift, activate Sculptris Pro. Z intensity down to 0, RGB off. And then you can go through here and you can tessellate a little area so that now when you drag through in that area, it'll be a little higher res. So the smaller you make your brush, the more dense the mesh will be. And again, we're not really changing the volume or the form of your geometry. We're just adding more geometry in that area, kind of spot adding it. However, with Drop 3D, what you can do is you can just keep your geometry as is. And again, as long as you don't have subdivision history, you can go in here and you can say Drop 3D, and then all the stuff we've been talking about with your layer brush. Again, it's just a 2.5D projection. It'll be super duper crisp. And then we'll go back in here to Z add. We'll go back in here to our pill shape, and we'll just drag that out. Anything you want to do, I won't belabor the point, but here's Drop 3D. Your subpixel size is where, you know, maybe bump this to the left. We'll go down to 1. Again, we want to keep it extra crispy, although, you know, compared to my decimated trash over here, it's going to be way nicer. However, we can go out of Drop 3D mode, and it'll leave the rest of this alone. You don't have to subdivide this from 204,000 to 10 million just to get these nice. It'll go through and isolate just this area, and it'll subdivide it enough to get that crispy look that you had while you were working. So that's kind of a cool thing, I think. Now, as far as how often I do this, maybe more often, because what I'm also doing lately, oh my gosh, should I get them? I've been printing miniatures. I got an Elegoo Mars 3 Pro, and I've been having a lot of fun printing stuff. I just did last night. What was I doing? This would be under recording. So I haven't printed it yet, but I've set this guy up for, you know, just kind of doing a cleanup. And oh my gosh, it was a little bit of trial and error to go through and do the remesh by union, because what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to resort to just Dynamesh for my envelopes. So I went through here and God, I wish you know what, I could probably show the process here as far as the cleanup process, but essentially all of these were separate objects, and of course when you have separate objects, there's like, you know, space underneath the teeth and behind the eyeballs, and just stuff you don't really think about when you're just modeling and you're not really thinking about 3D printing, which of course I haven't been through any of my models. However, I also didn't want to Dynamesh everything together because that can kind of soften. You can soften and then reproject your details. Just in case nobody knew that, what we can do is we can say, okay, we have the head here. I'm going to duplicate this off. And let's say, hey, I want to go through here and create an envelope. So I'm going to go through and let's grab, you can also pull from the Dynamesh slider to get the proper resolution that'll match. Although I don't know that that worked real well. Let's go down here. Geometry, Dynamesh. Resolution 176. I don't think that's accurate. I wonder if the decimation's throwing it off. Let's just crank it up. Dynamesh. There we go. So we've Dynameshed this object, but you can see it kind of, the little creases in the corner kind of get a little soft. This area gets a little soft, especially if you need to drop this envelope down in order to, you know, close any holes. That's another tactic you can use with Dynamesh. You just basically voxelize at a lower resolution, and that'll close more holes on complex objects. This is a very complex object. But another cool trick you can do is you have your original here. You don't even need to keep the original. You can just say Control tap this point in history. You can delete it at that point. You don't really need it around. You have it stored in history. Or it can be another subtool out here that you have that you're putting your history on here, and then you can go BHR, which is history project, and then you can go through here. Now, the history project brush right now is just going to take the existing geometry and push and pull it. So if I hold down Shift to smooth, bring my Z intensity back here, and then I use my history project brush, it'll go through and it'll project my existing geometry. However, my existing geometry is pretty low res, right? But if you go in here to Sculptors Pro and then make your brush size smaller, you can actually history project as you're updating the geo, so you can kind of spot get your deets back. And of course, you make your brush smaller, you'll get more detail. You make your brush bigger, you'll get less detail, but it'll still always be ABP, always be projecting. And then you can go through and clean it up. So you can voxelize your mesh, go through and spot cleanup using this, and then you can go through, of course, Z plugin, decimation master, preprocess current, blah, blah, blah. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So this here, playing around with that. Right? And then, of course, you can turn off Sculptors Pro if you want. Yeah, so VDM alpha creation, that kind of worked. Subdivision. Yeah. Hard surface posing with pose. The new, what was over here? Geometry proxy pose. I want to try this because one thing too that I was doing is we have this whole mesh, right? And in fact, let's go ahead and say delete all, because especially sometimes when I'm doing organic stuff, I can ZBrush and project my detail back, and I have subdivision history, so it's easy to pose because you can always drop down to subdivision level 1 and pose it. However, when I'm doing stuff like this, for example, that we just talked about, I'm going through here and I'm doing like a block out refine, right? Or hell, even the refine form, I think that'll be a decent one. So we'll say delete other. So we've got this object and I want to go through and pose it, but it's not, I rarely go through and Z remesh and project details back from a hard surface. This is going to require a bit of setup, but essentially, wonder if I could do this. Let's try it. So this is 3 million polygons. Basically what I would do is I wouldn't go through and Z remesh and Z project, but what I could do is set up a proxy pose to make it performant and send it over to transpose master instead of a monster file. But now I'm starting to wonder, since these are all separate pieces, I wonder how that would handle it. Only one way to find out, right? I really don't know. Okay, it's fairly representative. Oops, I probably shouldn't have done that. If you go into proxy pose and you want to get out of proxy pose, just hit Control Z. It's a lot faster. This will try to undrop the proxy pose. It'll take a little bit longer. But what I'm wondering is all these separate objects, God, that'll just be much easier to pose, a little bit more performant. Okay, so I'm going to take this reduction amount. I'm just going to drag it. Again, we're going from 4 million down, so I'm just going to kind of drag this to the left just to make sure all the little pieces are represented relatively fairly. Okay, so now we're down to 120,000 active points. If I had separate subtools for like the lower arm, the hand, the upper arm, which the chest, all the stuff I was going to do, I could send it over to Transpose Master. But right now, I just have a bunch of separate. Ooh, I got some overlapping objects there. I have a bunch of separate objects. So if I wanted to pose this just as is, all lumped together, it should be fairly easy. Although you still have to treat it like a Transpose Master. So in that case, I guess this is his elbow, huh? So here, Control Shift A, we'll get rid of this. Control Shift A, get rid of this. And I'm going to hit Control W to make that all one poly group. And then I'm going to say get rid of this. Control Shift A. Yeah, wrist, Control W. Sorry, I'm just practicing here. Control W, and I can just continue making polygroups down, although these should all be together, I think. Okay, so now I want to pose this arm really easy to go in here and hit Control Tap. I've already got my pivot set. I can rotate around that pivot. I can go in here and do, I want to grab multiple, right? So now I couldn't use Z-spheres because that would give me bending, but this does make it a lot faster and easier to pose. Well, that's cool. All right. I'll have to play around with this a little bit more to see. W, Control Tap, set my pivot, bend this out, rotate it around. All right. And then of course we want to hop out of proxy pose. Let me think about that. Yeah, that works. Okay. I'm sorry, chat. Get caught back up. Let me see here. Oh gosh, there's a lot of chat. Yeah, a little bit of new tools. 2D background, standing drawing practices, lines, cues, perspective, tone breakdown, etc. Yes. Muscle memory, something similar in the ZBrush sculpt. Okay, yeah, as far as like, hey, I'm going to take a plaster cast of an ear and then I'm going to, train my eye to observe and then study halftones and stuff like that. What would the 3D equivalent be of practicing stuff in 3D? I think it would, there's probably a better answer to that as far as like, hey, take this abstract section of a something and then recreate it in 3D. And honestly, it kind of depends on the tools because like, okay, I'm going to get better at sculpting volumes. Is this a fun thing? Kind of the fun thing about 3D. I want to get better at sculpting volumes with ZBrush. Well, I want to sculpt an ear. You can always go in here to, gosh, there's even there's the vector displacement brushes we were talking about. You can get better at sculpting volumes of an ear, or if we're talking about production art and not just training our hands to be more dexterous, or our hands to be able to sculpt forms, you can just go in here and use insert mesh brushes or from scan data or vector displacement alphas that already have ears ready to go, and you're kind of done. So at that point, you're not better at sculpting, but you are better at being a production artist who can get things done quickly and effectively, but you probably want to add your ability to sculpt to this. So in this case, it would be, okay, let's grab some scan data. Let's see if I have something just immediately available. Head scans, neutral, Z tool. And it's 3D, so that'll come in handy too. So we've got this guy here. I'm going to say take his neutral head. I'm going to say delete other. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say texture map off. I'm going to go here to subdivision level. I mean, we're just doing volume, so probably subdivision level 4 is plenty. I'll go ahead and say delete lower, delete higher. I'm going to grab his ear here. And of course, you can turn his ear into an IMM brush, but that's not the point of this exercise. So I'm going to, let's grab all of his ear here. We're going to go to the side. So we're going to do an ear study. And we're going to say delete hidden. So here's our little ear study. Of course, you can also use this as you're in your 2D class, right? So you can go in here to perspective. You can turn on shadows. You can actually throw it into a, oh, we got a renderer in here. You can go in here to render, redshift renderer. We'll go ahead and turn that on. And then render, we'll hit BPR. And so now you can go in and change your lighting and, you know, like you were saying, do those halftone studies, make sure you're getting the volumes and whatever you do in the 2D world to go through and draw this and talk about drawing and doing your drawing stuff. With different types of materials too, if you want to do, the other cool thing too, if you want to get into, here's a metal ear and you want to talk about that type of shading, and reflections and stuff like that, you could do that. But anyway, going back here to our startup material, you could do like this. You could do like Shift S and store a bunch of different shots of it here, just to kind of get an idea of what it is. And then you can go to just a plane and then just start sculpting the ear. What I might consider doing is going here. We have our neutral ear. I'm going to go ahead and just hit unify. So deformation unify just makes it into a ZBrush unit size, just a base square size, puts it right down to the middle of your canvas, so you can go through here pretty easily and say, you know what, we'll just append a sphere. And so now I can kind of squash the sphere. We'll kind of set it here-ish. And if I make these occupy the same space, what I can do is then go over here to transform. I can say split screen, and now you know what, and we'll just start with we'll treat it like clay. So we'll go through here, and that's the thing too, is like anything in 3D where it's like, what would be good in ZBrush in order to get better at sculpting? Well, any techniques like this would be another thing that you would do in like a traditional sculpting class. Just do that in ZBrush. So any sculpting stuff, and honestly I don't know what they are because I'm not a traditional sculptor, but any traditional sculptor stuff that might get you better at becoming a better sculptor, do those exercises in ZBrush and try not to cheat. Instead of like using vector displacement alpha to drag out an ear, go in and use sculpting brushes. So in this case, and if you want this to be more like a clay experience, going into Dynamesh, Geometry Dynamesh, just hitting Dynamesh. And again, this is something you really can't do in clay because clay is, you know, particles, and you can start sketchy with clay, of course. You can go through here and be like, okay, this is my overall shape, and it's going to be pretty low res. In fact, you can go even lower res than this, maybe what might be better than this. So we've got a clay brush, so you can go through there, and whatever volumes you want to kind of mass out first, you can go through here. Another thing that would be maybe difficult to do traditionally, but go through here and mask, and then, you know, kind of pull stuff out to kind of get the overall shape. This would be like a tool that you could use in a traditional, you know, just go grab one of your sculpting tools and go through here, and again, you're just looking at the volumes and then going through here and modifying them with your finger to move this stuff around. But the cool thing about this is you can go again, you can drop your resolution to force yourself into just sculpting and getting the volumes correct, and then going in here and raising your resolution, and then refining that. And I think that might, and then while you're rotating, you're constantly getting an update visual over here of what you're matching. So I don't know, that might be something that would maybe do it. 2D stroke shelving, you know what the conic ray and other strokes are? I don't. And again, I haven't really used the drop 3D stuff since my Eat 3D days when we were doing like Projection Master. I wonder if they still have that. I assume they do. Haven't played with it in 15 years, but would it be in here? Projection Master. I don't even really remember. That'd be under stroke. It's been so long. Is it under document? Paint Stop. Everybody remember Paint Stop? Zap Link. Haven't used that in a while. Yeah, somewhere in here is Projection Master, where it kind of does the same thing. It drops it into a 2.5D state and then you pick it up, but it doesn't locally subdivide. But as far as, yeah, the ray strokes, honestly, I would probably go to their documentation at that point just to be like, hey, let me remind myself, or look it up on YouTube. But of course I wouldn't have YouTube videos on it, so it wouldn't be my voice, which might be a good thing, which would definitely be a good thing. So drop 3D, rotate dot. Let's get something that we can actually see what's happening. So we have our alpha here. We still have that selected. Let's go to single layer brush, stroke, rotate dot. Oh, that's another thing too. So this one, one thing I forgot to mention is, so we have our pill here, and we'll say just temporarily do a drag rect alpha off. So we have our pill that we want to apply to our object, and it's following the surface normal. However, since this is a curved object and we go here, it's just going to project us straight back. So the back of this is just going to go straight back to the object. So that's something to keep in mind while you're doing this. You probably want to pick it up, rotate the object, drop it back down, and then project it, so it's a little bit more of a straight down projection. However, you can also go in here to your picker. I think maybe we talked about this, orientation, and you can use this to set your orientation. And actually, I guess that didn't make a whole lot of sense. We'll just say, just click on here once, and then no matter where we drag on the object, it'll always be oriented straight at the camera. One thing, if I go in here to ring, you see it drags like that way. If you go in here to picker and you say, hey, I want to see it from this angle, now it'll drag, you know, like a ring out. And then of course go out to drop 3D, and remember, the further away you are from the camera as it starts to curve around, it'll just shoot straight back. However, one cool thing is if we do like a drop 3D, we mix that with stencil. So we can turn our, we don't really have a stencil, but we can go in here to our alphas here. And is there a cool alpha? Yeah, we'll use this one. We have an alpha here, and so with this one, I'm going to say transfer make stencil. That'll put it in here in the stencil mode. We'll hit our space bar and we'll move this over, and you'll see this stencil just goes, you know, again, straight back. So if we wanted to, you could use RGB or you can use Z-add, and we can go through here with like a single layer brush, and we could, let's see, can we? Oh, we need to invert the stencil, but we can go through and we can, let's do, we can go through here and we can use this to our advantage. I'm going to say I want this shape right here. So a single layer brush, we're adding through that shape. But like I was saying, if we go in here to stencil and we turn on wrap mode, now as we move this around, it'll actually wrap to the underlying surface, which is really kind of cool. So you can use that to your advantage. So we can move that around, and then we'll stencil this out, and then we'll go out of drop. Where's that at? Alpha, transform, brush, render, document, drop 3D. Whew, there we go. And then of course stencil off. But yeah, as far as those other strokes, I have no idea. I would just have to play with them. Is there more demand for 3D character artists or props environments? I feel like this, I don't know if this is an old stat or not, but I feel like it's at one point in time there was more NFL players than there were character artists in the industry. It's not a demand thing. It's more of a, in the grand scheme of making a game, how many characters do you have versus how much environment work is required. And an environment artist is a really broad term, so that actually is more people possibly than a character artist, which isn't as broad of a term. But if you include character artists as like sandbox artists, so characters, weapons, vehicles, mechs, creatures, anything that's animated, that broadens it a bit. But I would say generally speaking, there's a lot more bodies needed for environment work than there are for character works, depending on the project, of course. There's caveats to everything I say about the industry, but yeah, environment, probably lower barrier to entry there. Yes. Opinion on Taya Conceptor, formerly known as Polybrush. I have no idea. If I don't have an opinion. Looks cool. Let me go to images. These websites aren't. Oh, is it got, yeah, like a kind of a meets Meyer meets Tyler Smith meets Kurt Papstein. Yeah, totally cool. I like it. Meets Giger. Is that how you pronounce his name? Let's see, can't get a job. Yeah, I agree with what Highfly says. Yeah, Earthworm Jim. Yeah, I'm sorry about Twitch, man. I don't know why that's broken. I'll have to dig into that. How much detail do you have to make a block out for a hard surface designs? How much do you start making it clean? That's kind of depends on what you're making and how you're making it. So for instance, if I wanted to go through and make a sub-D model of this type of thing, it would be nearly impossible for me to go through and be like, hey, let me box model this and then go through and refine it and then cut this in while just kind of roughly designing it. So it's a lot easier for me to design something and then take a little piece here. We don't need this. Sorry, this is heavier than I thought it was going to be. We could probably decimate this down. So basically, take whatever little pieces that you need from it and then just rebuild it. One really good example of that, let's go ahead and say split hidden. So for example, if I go through here, so now if I wanted to throw this into Fusion 360 or Maximize Moto Blender Cinema 4D or right here in ZBrush, go through and refine this. As far as hard surface is concerned, I'll give you a document that'll go into that a little bit. Examples. So here's kind of a hard surface linear walkthrough. Let me share it. Copy here. I'll paste it. It's going to drop me down, so I'm probably going to lose a lot of my place here in the comments. But so for example, if you go scroll down here into like the brute force kiosk masons here, split and clean meshes here's an example of exactly what we're talking about, where you go through and you just grab a piece of something and then you can go through in ZBrush and refine it using kind of zero mesh kind of sculpting techniques. The id Software presentation is really good. Theirs is kind of a combination, so you can go through and you can do video's taking forever to load. You know, Z modeler just to kind of get your base shapes, dynamic subdivision increasing, and then go in with your sculpted details to get this, as opposed to trying to resolve this with an SD of subdivision. You know, going through and rebuilding this with sub-Ds and getting this to appropriately, I mean, it's a lot of work for something that's probably pretty inconsequential on the character. So, and it's also, you know, you might say, oh, it's destructive to go through and use just dragging alphas. It's actually, if you were to go through and create control loops and edge loops to put all this detail on here and you wanted to make any changes, you would basically be starting from scratch, unless it was a very simple change somewhere in here. If you needed to make, you know, even just repositioning some of this stuff would be a lot of minutes of rework, whereas if it's just sculpted detail, smooth it out, do a little H polish, redrag the alpha, and you're done. So a couple minutes worth of work for something you're going to bake out versus going in and rebuilding something for 2 or 3 hours just to bake it out. You know, it's kind of, that's a little bit crazy. As far as like doing your ZBrush and then rebuilding it, this is Benner, so we can check him out. Let's go to his main page here. So for instance, you can go through and do, like it has here, go to this level in ZBrush, you know, and kind of the same thing here. This isn't as complex or anything like that, but do your entire thing in ZBrush really quickly. This type of thing would take you maybe a day to kind of get blocked out, and then it's like, okay, I got my volumes where I need them. I kind of know where my polys need to go, and then you can just go in here and just rebuild it, and you can use anything for that. And a good example of that would be, I mean, all of these are good examples, but something that's rebuilt. So here you can just make it all in ZBrush, and then when you go in and rebuild it, you get, you know, here's your sub-D surfaces. And then once you have it sub-D, then you can go in and just cut in extra little stuff with your geometry as needed. But yeah, that's a cool workflow too, as far as like designing and hard surface and rebuilding. It's a lot of work, but it would, like I said, it is a lot of work, but it would be nearly impossible for me to like design and box model at the same time. It's just not how I could do it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. No, Twitch is not intentional. Sorry about that. But I don't know how to fix it, so I'm going to leave it dead, unfortunately. You know, if there's any way to bake maps from ZBrush from UVs we have in all subtools. The only time I ever bake in ZBrush is if I'm going from like a 40 million polygon scan data to a mesh and I need like a normal map or something, or a displacement. Like honestly, that's it. It's for normal map and displacement for exactly that purpose. Anything else I bake in any other program. There is the multi-map exporter, but I don't think it'll do it for every subtool. Where is that? Do I not have that? Multi-map export. There it is. Create all maps, export options, export maps for visible subtools. Okay, there you go. Yeah, okay. So, yay, Z plugin, multi-map exporter, turn on subtools, and then, you know, play with your settings in here, and that should, supposedly, that button does turn it on. It says it will bake all your maps for all your subtools. Cool. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Is it possible to mirror the instance copy after using create instance subtool macro? Yeah. So you're gonna, yeah, okay, yeah, there is. It gets a little bit weird, but I got you covered. So here, we're going to say, what's that called? That is the, so here's the instances, create instance subtool, model and symmetry anywhere in space. I want to say stacking nanomesh and axis symmetry meshes. One of these three, I go through and we have our plane. Okay, there we go. Yeah, we have our, so see here we have our plane, and then when we mirror the plane, it throws off, you know, the mirror. So actually, yeah. And then we go through here. You basically do a spin edges here, and then you can spin it around to get it to match. I don't know that it's a perfect mirror. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is mirrored. You just go through and spin edges, and that'll set it up. So I'll put this right here, right before we mirror it. Okay. Share. Start at. Copy. There you go. Yes, you can. Maybe. There might be some instances where it's not possible, but you can kind of fake it. If you can mirror it and then duplicate it over and then put it into place manually, brute force. But cool. Okay. Another thing I wanted to try. So we did hard surface proxy pose. I think that'll work fine. Let's go ahead and say delete all. Let's go ahead. You know, let's clear out our ZBrush session. Shut it down. I wanted to try, we'll do, I don't know. Also, while y'all are thinking about this, I'll put you to work. Is there anything that I've done, generally speaking, that would be cool to 3D print that wouldn't, so this one I set up for 3D printing. It worked pretty well. This guy might be interesting. I'd love to do this one 3D printed, but it'd be a lot of, some of these would be a lot of setup work, and some of these I don't have the source file anymore. I don't know if I had the helmet source file for that anymore. The mech helmet would be a nightmare. This might be a nightmare, this little concept sculpt I have here. Trying to think of something that would be a fun, interesting 3D print, or maybe even something I could pose in 3D print like we did with the Rancor, which was fun last live stream. This old Legends of Norath stuff. My old E3D stuff might be okay. I'd have to track that down. Well, any old DC Universe Online stuff. I don't think they'd mind. This is really old stuff, though. My Ninja Turtle we've already done. I don't feel like 3D printing him, though. Just trying to think of something. This looks like it'd be fun, but also a nightmare. Maybe this guy would be cool, but he needs a little bit of anatomy cleanup. The dice I could 3D print. Or you know what I could do? I could set up my Earthworm Jim for 3D printing. I could go ahead and do that because I got to start work, and maybe I could make y'all watch me do that against your wills. Maybe the waffle might be kind of fun. SpongeBob might be kind of fun. I don't know. Think about it. Oh, all UVs in one map, would it be possible? Separate subtools in one. So what you'd have to do, did I not restart ZBrush? So what you'd have to do is, I have a bunch of separate subtools and they all have, and I want them to all be UV'd on one sheet. Well, no, yeah, you couldn't. So what I was gonna say is, let's see here, is temporarily, let's go in here to tool, get something with a bunch of subtools. So here we got a bunch of subtools, and we want to UV all of these objects onto one 0 to 1 sheet. What you'd have to do temporarily is go in here to subtool. I wonder if you could use a rudimentary form of transpose master than UV. If transpose master could transfer UVs at the same time, that'd be great, but probably can't. So what you could do is you would basically have to temporarily merge, and I would say turn off weld, but keep UVs on. So merge visible. Go through here, UV everything, break everything apart, because you'd have to UV it as one subtool to get on the 1 0 to 1 sheet in ZBrush, and then break it apart. And when you break it apart, as long as UVs are turned on, actually I'd be under split, it should keep the UVs, and then each individual subtool would have its own section on the UV sheet. But then when you went to bake, you'd have to manually go into Photoshop or something and comp all that together. Again, in that instance, I would use any other baking solution other than ZBrush. It's really not set up for that type of work. But any other baker in the universe would usually have, like, here's the, like, Marmoset's a really good example. Is here's my high, here's my low, here's for multiple sub tools or objects, and then bake that all to one sheet, obviously, and all sorts of, but, you know, that's not ZBrush. Fiber mesh to Maya, convert it to XGen, bring it Unreal. There is an Olympic export option in ZBrush. Oh, is there? Let's see. I didn't even know that. That's exactly how I would do it. I'm not an XGen expert by any stretch of the imagination. I haven't really touched that stuff a lot. Let's see, export curves, preview settings. Let's see. So we want hair, preview my hair. Okay, and then we want to say accept. Sure. Got my hair. Export. Alembic. Alembic ABC. You can try it. I don't know what that would be exactly, but yeah, I don't know if it would. That might. I don't know. I don't know what that would entail as far as what that file format does. Give it a shot. Waste of the Earthworm Jim would be great set on a base. Yeah, okay, let's do that. Group all polygroups, UV, split by groups. So yeah, talking about UVing, group by polygroups, UV, split by groups. Yeah, that would split it out in its own subtools if you wanted every group to be split out into its own thing. But again, I think you'd have to comp it together. Yeah, sorry about that horror trailer music. Cool. Yeah, okay, yeah, if it works, ABC. Cool, give it a shot, let me know. Okay, so what was I doing? Oh yeah, so let's say delete all. So I will say delete all. And if I go in here, let's load up. So, okay, we can do this. So here's my full res might be dirty. Let's look at it. Actually, it's probably clean. But what I could do, append, I can take you through my process real quick. I don't know if anybody'd find it interesting, but so I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to so appended a cube, made it a subtractive. So here's union subtractive additive for my Booleans. Turn on my Boolean, then I can use this to kind of slice through my mesh just to make sure that everything's airtight and clean, and everything's expected, right? And you can even go through, you can find islands in this mode if you wanted to. So we're going through here and everything's clean. Dang, well, that's not good. So let's say delete all. I'm gonna go in here to an older version. And how I find anything on my computer nowadays is going into, the Everything app and typing in earthworm. There we go. So here's an example of my original garbage mesh. And by garbage, I just mean for 3D printing. It's fine for rendering, you know, and 3D stuff. And even if you wanted to like UV and bake this or whatever, it'd be fine. However, if I was to go in here and say, okay, I'm going to grab all my head pieces together. Let's hit W, go in here to move multiple, control drag over this. I don't actually want the rings. Those are going to be an interesting challenge. So now I can go through here, I can hit control F and say yes, and then say head. And now I've got all my head subtools in one section here, like so. Well, boop, beep, boop, beep, bop, boop. And so now I can kind of focus in on just these objects. However, you're going to see when I modeled this, obviously I wasn't thinking about 3D printing, so it's just teeth sitting in here, and they're empty inside, and there's holes that go in here. So I obviously want to fill all this up. So this type of stuff might be easier, where it's like go in here to my move brush, I'm going to inset these teeth a little bit, and then I'm going to overlap them like so, just to kind of push these up into space. And they're all separate subtools, so it's very easy to go through here. Alt tap anything. Oh, the lens on the eyes I don't need, so I'll just delete those out of there, etc., etc. And if I want to also make things a little bit easier, I can go in here to move brush, turn on auto masking, and we can turn on backface masking. I have a hotkey for that, so I can just toggle it on and off for any brush, and turn on backface masking, grab the body, and you can just grab the pieces and kind of just mush them together, just to make sure that they all stick. However, and you might be thinking, okay, great, this is all fine. So I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to say, in here, I'm going to say merge folder, and then I'm going to say delete all. So now all the head stuff is merged into one subtool. Whoops, I forgot. One thing you always want to do, I'm going to say split hidden, hit Control D a couple times, and then merge that back down. If I'm going to do this again, I'm going to, let's turn everything back on just real quick. So if I do anything that has dynamic subdivisions on, I would want to go through here and apply it. There is a Z plugin Clean Tool Master, Clean Tool Utility. There is a dynamic subdivision to actual subdivisions. You can just hit that, and that'll go through all your subtools and hit that apply button for you, basically. You can also use the repeater to set that up. Or now what you could do is you could literally find one subtool that has dynamic apply available, hit that button, go up here and say apply last action to all subtools, boop, and that would do it too. That's a new feature. Anyway, so we got this head. I don't need the poly paint. We're not printing color. And so that would actually get rid of these problem areas here. There we go. Split hidden, bloop, 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 merge down. Okay. So now you might be thinking, okay, the teeth have that volume filled or whatever, but, and also stuff you may not have even noticed, like stuff behind the eye. So again, if you want to check that, go in here and append, and you can say, grab a cube here. We'll just go ahead and keep this cube in our scene, and then again set this turn off move multiple, subtractive, live boolean turned on, and then as you go and you scrub, you slice through your mesh, you'll start seeing these little cavities open up. And another, really tricky one is that cavity right behind that eyeball. All little, a little piece of air got in there, and then it's, there's a cavity in there. So what you could do is you could go through here while you're slicing and go in here and say, move brush, backface masking, and literally just, select the head and go through here and just mush all this stuff together. It's going to make some pretty nasty geometry, and then just continue to move up through the mesh here and then go back here and move this stuff into place. It'll, Q-Alt-W. Excel. Once you've done that, you can turn this off. I'm going to hit W on this object. You can go in here and say remesh by union. That'll do a Boolean remesh. And then now when I go through here with my thing, you can see, oh, it's all cleaned up. Now, of course, where we didn't continue moving this stuff together, it's still going to have a bunch of cavities. But again, that's just one method you could use. You can also just stuff a piece of geometry in here. That's what I would do for maybe this area is maybe you could grab the back of the teeth and mush it together, or just put a sphere in there and just fill that space. Now, it's not the funnest thing in the world to do, but that will keep all of this stuff extra crispy because it's doing a Boolean operation. So literally this entire shape and this entire shape is going to stay the exact same, and it's going to stitch together along that seam line, generating whatever geometry it needs to give you the exact points that build this shape. Now, like we were talking about earlier though, you can use this, delete, you can use this as your proxy, and then you can control tap that point in space, and then you can go through here and you can create an envelope using Dynamesh. So again, we'll Dynamesh resolution up quite a bit, and we'll say Dynamesh this, and this will, as long as you don't have any little air, like behind the eyeball had a little air that could get in and then create a cavity, this will actually voxelize your mesh. I shouldn't have deleted that. Sorry, cube, subtractive, move. So now as we go through, it actually got rid of that little interior space on the mouth, you know, because all the teeth were closed, so I don't even have to fix that, and that actually fixed everything. However, so voxelizing an envelope is great, and you can use Dynamesh for that. It's awesome. However, what Dynamesh is also going to do, like we talked about before, is those nice crispy lines we had where these things intersected is now kind of meh. You know, it's kind of, and especially when you get into like the lower resolutions. And again, you can actually drop this resolution down in order to voxelize at a larger size and close any tiny gaps that'll give you a better envelope. But then you'd have to go back in here with BHR History Project with your Sculptris Pro turned on, and then maybe go in here and just re-clean up. And this is camera based, so you want to be careful, but kind of rotate your brush around and then re-grab your nice areas and then decimate that down. If you're ever in a really sticky spot where it's like, there's a bunch of little cavities and I don't want to go through and find them all, it's just a total pain in the ass. Another way you can get an envelope, may or may not be interesting, is go down here to remesh. It's not ZRemesh, it's remesh, so subtool remesh. It'll remesh any subtools that are visible on your screen, so you could have multiple subtools turned on and it'll remesh all of them. But in this case, we just have one. And then going down here to, what are they doing? Remesh. It's not X symmetry, so I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn the polish down to 5. And then, oh, you know what? This maybe requires, okay, fine. Append a sphere. I'm going to trick it. It requires multiple subtools, it looks like. So in that case, I'll give you multiple subtools. Only one of them will be inside the other. Okay, so now it's unlocked. So I'm going to say, okay, remesh visible. It's going to make an envelope of what's visible on my screen. Polish down to 5. Resolution, I'm going to crank up to 1024, just hit remesh. And now we have just an envelope with no cavities. So if we go into solo mode, here is our remeshed mesh. Again, totally envelopey. We'll go ahead and delete this out of here. And so now with, well, with just these two showing, I could go in here and say subtool project all. That'll project all visible subtools. You can also, we still have it stored in history, right? Our original high-res points, I can go in here and say project history, and that'll project it back. Now, the resolution on this isn't great, but of course you can go in here to Control D to subdivide and then project history, and then just keep doing that, as well as if you want to go ahead and just kill, delete lower, go through there again, BHR history reproject, and then go in here manually, sorry, history recall, and turn on Sculptris Pro, and then now we can go through here and just kind of manually get our details back. That's another option. Just kind of getting a nice clean envelope and then doing a little bit of cleanup work. Does that all make sense? And then when you do all that, and then you decimate it down, now you have, oh, and also we did a little bit of cool, hopefully it works. I haven't really done this before. We did some key registration and kind of shrink some things down, and you know, so I can print his gun out separately, and then kind of, hopefully, I think it'll slide into his, I think I did it right, slide into his hand. So, and even his head here is Booleaned out, so when I pop his head out of his thing, there should just fit right in there, and there's, again, another little key registration. I don't know if this will work great. Again, I'm by no means an expert, but we'll see if it works. Yeah, and then we can throw that into our 3D printing Chitu box or lychee slicer. You know, maybe we'll do that. I'll get that set up, and then I'll set off a print, and then I'll start work. Solution for sculpting something like close fingers to not stick together. In this case, I wanted the fingers to stick together just to create an envelope. But for instance, If we go through here, BI brush insert body parts. Oh, thank you. Hit M on your keyboard, and then here's a hand, for example. Or say split mask points. What I generally do is, actually that's a bad example. Think. Let's grab something. I just need something. Yeah, here we go. We got a human male here. I want to go through and I always want to have fun, right? So I'm going to say delete other. I'm just going to use this as my base. And we're going to say, again, I'm just going to be doing a creature sculpt. So I'm going to say Dynamesh this. I'm going to need to go here to layers, bake all. So we're just going to Dynamesh this. Actually, looks like we need to turn on dynamic apply. So it's real geometry. Now I'll Dynamesh this. And of course, if we want to Dynamesh at a very low resolution, you'll start getting fingers sticking together, right? So in that case, if I'm just going super rough and I'm like, okay, don't worry. Let's turn on Sculptors Pro. It's raining. I'm going to eat away some of this cavity geometry here. We're doing a creature sculpt, but I tend to, when I'm just kind of concepting things out, what I'll do is temporarily grab, for example, the head, split hidden, go back to the body, hands, split hidden, and then as I'm Dynameshing the body, I'll Dynamesh this as a lower resolution just while I'm kind of going through and blocking out stuff. And then this one, I'll raise the resolution a little bit on the head, maybe a little bit more. Because again, I'm doing volumes, but I like the, we're kind of searching out the functionality or the personality of the character in this section here. So I tend to sculpt, and it's also a little bit smaller, so I tend to sculpt like a little bit more with a slightly higher resolution on the head. And then same thing for the hands. Instead of being like, okay, for the hands, have it super low, and that ends up being what I get. I'll just just dial that in at a higher resolution. And then once I'm done getting that up to like subdivision level, this is something we talked about too. I'll give you an example of an example of, well, how far do you go with all these separate subtools before you start combining the stuff together and Z-remeshing it. Oh, my original had polypaint. And that isn't the one I wanted because we updated it. Sorry. There we go. Yeah, this one. Okay, so for example, it's like I've got this all split out into separate subtools here, and even here you can see the hand is a separate subtool from the arm, and I will sculpt it to about this resolution before I even start thinking about, okay, now I want to merge these things together. And again, because we're getting into like second tertiary forms, and so at that point I'm like, I'm not going to do anything major like pulling out major horns or anything. Everything's pretty much set. I'm just going in there and doing some really fine detail. So at that point I feel safe to go, okay, shift, bent down arrow, alt tap the hand, shift, bent down arrow. I'll keep the nails separate just because it's easier to work on and they're a different material. And then I'll go to the arms here, merge this down, control drag to, we'll just Dynamesh this here. Just Dynamesh these together. And then just continue working, or this would be where I'd start Z-remeshing and reprojecting, or yeah, we're not doing proxy pose. So at this point I want to start detailing, right? So before I'm going to control tap these points in history to store them. I've Dynameshed them together to give me a entire envelope of both of these, and I'm going to go in here to Z-remesh, depth size down quite a bit, maybe even down to 0. Target polygon count of, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. And then I'll get my low res envelope here, and then I'll say project history, control D to subdivide, project history, control D to subdivide, project history, control D to subdivide, project history. And now I've got my details back. I have subdivision history. I can UV this if I want to, no problem. And the only thing I need to do, let's subdivide one more time and project history. The only thing I need to do is clean up any seams. That's interesting. I shouldn't have had a projection error on the fingers unless the original was badly separated, which I probably did. So you might be saying like, well, now you have a seam. Well, it's fairly simple just to go in here and smooth this out and then start cleaning it up. And now you can go in here in earnest and start doing like really, really fine skin details on this object. Exact same thing here, where work on these at different resolutions, get everything about where you want, and then start merging things down, zero meshing, projecting your details back, and then continuing to refine, subdivide, refine, subdivide, refine. If that makes sense. And in fact, another option you could take, let's turn all these off. It just bugs me. So let's say we didn't have hands. This is where I'd go in here and say, hey, you know what? Let me just grab some hands. I do this all the time. In fact, I've often wanted to make my own hand because I'm not in love with these hands, but they're fine. So we'll go ahead and say split mask points, and you can, you know, put these in place, and let's turn on LSIM with dynamic off so we can scale along that axis. So now we have a hand that has separate geometry, and that's totally fine. The only thing I would do at this point is go in the back here and say close with my zoom outlet brush, BZM, close convex hole. We'll just go ahead and close that off. Give it a polygroup, maybe say crease PG, crease polygroup under your crease menu. And then as you're refining your body, if you're not doing any major changes to these hands, you can just go in here and just hit Control D to subdivide. So instead of dynameshing and getting your fingers all, you know, stuck together, you can just turn off dynamesh and then just hit Control D to subdivide. The geometry is pretty fairly laid out. So then you can go through here and you can sculpt this up as needed. You can sculpt this up as dynamesh is needed. And then again, at the very end, go through there, merge together, project your detail back, etc. Any chance to see how new postable tool works with multiple subtools, shoulder pads, etc.? Absolutely. I got you covered. I got you covered. So, well, I got you covered in two areas. Nope, that wasn't, that was, I forgot. We did it on Pixelotics channel, so it's actually a video on mine. I think we had a hodgepodge. Oh, there it is. So ZBrush 2023 new features, what's new? I did cover it in here. I'll go ahead and copy this here, but don't click that because this one right here, Transpose Master, I talk about using Transpose Master with multiple subtools with Proxy Pose and Z-Sphere rigging. Now, of course, you can skip any one or all of those. You don't want to skip all those features, but all those features can be used separately, or you can pick and choose what feature you want to use. So this one right here is the good one. So check that one out. That'll walk you through posing multiple subtools or using Proxy Pose on multiple subtools. At the end of the day, all it is hitting Proxy Pose, hitting the down arrow on your keyboard, and then hitting Proxy Pose again for all your subtools, sending it over to Transpose Master, doing whatever you want, and then transposing it back to your Proxy Pose, turning off Proxy Pose, and you're good to go. The only bad thing is, unfortunate thing, is underneath here, technically you should be able to say, okay, hit Proxy Pose for anything in here, and then say apply last action to all subtools. It won't do that. So again, just in this case, I'm gonna hit the up arrow key and turn on Proxy Pose, hit the up arrow key, turn on Proxy Pose. There we go. So everything's now Proxy Posed. Go in here to Z plugin. If you want to pose everything together in an easy way, then Transpose Master, Transpose Mesh here. We didn't bring in a rig, but you know, transpose had this however you'd like. In this case, probably masking and transposing, and then once you're done with that, sending it back over, and that'll update all your proxy poses, and then you just got to go through and turn your proxy pose off for all your subtools, and you're back where you started. Yeah, sorry about that on Twitch. Automatic supports of ChichiBox works fine for 3D printing. Generally speaking, yes. You ever share images of your prints after they're printed? Kind of. What I'll do is if we go in here and we'll say, I'll do a video. It's like the Benny 5, and I think I've got an Elegoo Mars 2 mono. So I'll just do a video of it. I think, are those the other ones here? Looks like I had another Benny 5 Mars 2 mono. I guess it's the only two I've done. So I'll do a video, and then I'll have, I am getting an airbrush, and I'm going to do primer because the detail on these things is really cool, except there's like, it's plastic, and then it kind of has a subsurface scattering effect that kind of makes it a little tougher to see the detail. So that's the only, I'm gonna see if I can't airbrush some primer on it. So many little things getting into miniature painting now. Oh boy. So let's talk about that. So let's say delete all, not miniature painting, but now that I see, did I even grab? Here's another cool thing about proxy pose I'd like to mention. Let's say I want to merge visible. I'm going to say delete all here. So speaking of miniatures, if I hit W, this is something we brought up in the other videos too, but we'll bring it up here because we're talking about it. If you turn on proxy pose, this is going to, of course, make this a lot easier to pose out. You don't have to worry about like zero meshing and projecting all your stuff. It'll just kind of do that for you and give you a low-res envelope to play with. However, if we go in here to E, which is scale, I'm just going to go to the middle. If you scale all this down and then you hop out of proxy pose, that's going to add contrast to all the details. So if you're going to be doing miniature stuff and you're like, I really need these details to pop, instead of going into deformation contrast or brush contrast delta or brush contrast target, you can use this to kind of dial in contrast. I actually did that on a hard surface object. I'll show you in just a second if this ever pops out of proxy pose. And it was a fairly large proxy pose. It's like 4 million polygons, so I'll cut it some slack. Oops, I must have had some stuff masked. But you can see in here, you know, the details just get a little more poppy, a little more contrasty. Like I said, you can go in here to brush contrast, target here, and just add more contrast locally, or go down here to deformation contrast. You can mask with this if you wanted to, but there is a contrast slider. You can just go in there and just crank up the contrast if you needed to. But that's an option for you. So delete all. And we'll say delete all. And we'll say, okay, so if I want to 3D print this and everything's all nicely Booleaned and everything's all cleaned up inside, this is an easy one. Go in here to Z plugin. You can, in another program, if you're doing this for 3D rendering, you can export an FBX and that'll have all the objects nicely named with all the polypaint and stuff. If you wanted to export all of these as OBJs, you can go in here to Z plugin, subtool master, and then if you do export here, that will export. You can do any of these things, but if you don't have export as a single file checked on, it'll export all of your separate subtools as a separate object or a separate file, which is what we want because we want to move them around on the build plate. Alternatively, there is a 3D print hub, and by default, if you go in here to export options, you're going to see all is checked on. In this case, we want visible checked on because we don't want to export their invisible stuff. Then you can export to STL or OBJ if you want to. It's all right there. And that'll export it to files. And now we can go into Cheat 2 Box and Lychee Slicer. I'll do a really quick one. I have Lychee Slicer Pro, which has a lot of really cool features, which I love. Rancor and Mini? Yeah, let's see what we did. Most recent. Yeah, sure. So what I printed last time was a little miniature, the Rancor we were just looking at. We posed it in our previous live stream here, and then I put little printed out little bases, and then I took my little armor reptile guy and I printed him out as well. There we go. So they're all hollowed out. Let's see if I remember how to navigate. So here's his generic, here's his base with his little key registration for his foot, and then here's the little generic base. I can swap these out, and then here's my little guy posed out with his little feet, and then here's this guy. Again, this is one where it's kind of weird, but I took him and I scaled him down with proxy pose, and then on the organic stuff, it worked great. On the hard surface stuff, since this was all one envelope mesh, which looking back, I probably wouldn't do again, what I had to do is go in with the history project tool and do some cleanup on these hard surface edges, because they'll start crisscrossing themselves as proxy pose is introducing contrast. So just fixing that up with, again, history reproject like we talked about. And then it printed out nice and small, and I kept all these little, you could even see like the hex patterns on the miniature. Like obviously if you print this out huge, which you could, I mean there's plenty of room on the build plate to print this guy out. And I have him here. So here's an example of him big. Just, I mean, you're not gonna be able to see this. This is my crappy webcam. But here he is, kind of a little bit smaller than baseball size. And obviously all his detail shows up great. But at a miniature size like this, he's not really set up for that. Like if you're going to print this small, usually what you would do is reduce the amount of, you know, you would make the hex patterns bigger. You would really increase their contrast. You know, you would pick and choose. You certainly wouldn't, you know, model this detail in, you know, these little vents here. Or if you did, it would be like 1, 2, 3, 4 vents as opposed to 16. Anyway, yeah, so then you go through here and oops. Let's hop back in here. Sorry, go in here to export. There we go. So here's our layer preview on here. Actually, let's go back to prepare layout, not prepare. So these have got the supports all in there. It's all hollowed out. There's interior supports. There's holes dug into it. And if we go in here to export, we can say, you know, check out the scale of these. They're actually pretty small. This is something I need to bring into ZBrush. I need to have a little scale scene so I can remind myself what scale I'm working at. If I'm, you know, this big, we're talking like little micro millimeter sizes. Here's the simulator. So here's what it'll look like as it prints out. Boop, go dip it in the vat and then pull it up along the build plate and then beep, all done. What else we got? Here's the picture. So this is what the files that it sends over. It sends over, the supports are in orange, but I think it all just prints out white. So basically it'll stop here, it'll harden the resin, and then it'll lift up a little section, harden the resin, lift up a little section, harden the resin, and as it hardens, it'll go through and print out your entire object. Like so. Oh, there you go. Now you can see it. So as it's printing out, it's going through here, and then when it's all done, this will be the bottom stuck to the build plate, and you'll have your little 3D printed things, and you pop the supports off, and then you go and do whatever. Now, having said all that, we'll do a really quick one in here, and then I'll do a little bit more involved one in Lychee Slicer because that's more options for me. There may be more options in Box Pro or something like that, but I don't have that. So let me go find my files. What were we looking for here? This is going to be under, sorry. I've been doing a lot of stuff lately. Recording, Mars files. Okay, so here's my Earthworm Jim stuff. I'm going to drop it in here. Boop, beep, beep. Yay. And we're going to say, I think there's an arrange all on here, isn't there? Sorry, I don't use this one very often. Auto layout. Can I auto layout all these? Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is their native scale at whatever scale I was working at. Of course, you probably do want to set up your scale in case you want to go through, because you don't, generally speaking, you don't want to go through here, do a bunch of stuff, and then throw it, and then scale it up, and then forget what scale you're working at. And then if you want to print out like, oh, I need another right hand, well, you just want to drop the right hand in and print it, right? You don't want to have to think about like, shoot, what was that scale we changed on here? So just something to keep in mind. So, and then what we want to do is, and again, there might be some auto rotation stuff you can do, but generally speaking, if you're going to have supports on here, and so if we take this and we rotate it, you want to kind of put the supports. Let's just do select one. How do I get out of? There we go. So we have the body here, and I want to put the supports where they won't be seen, which is probably going to be along the back-ish, you know, so try and pick a direction that the supports won't make too much of a difference. Oh, and the other thing too is this won't show me suction cup stuff, but anyway, you get the idea. Put your supports where you're not going to see them. Here, if we go in here, we can say it's going to dig a hole. We can hollow this out. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and start, and then I'll go ahead and hollow this out. So yay, and you can do that for all your objects. But now we have holes in here, and then if we want to have some drainage, we can actually hide some of those. And again, I can't see the suction cup areas or the problematic areas for having a hollowed out mesh and stuff. But what we can do is go in here, we can dig a hole in 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters. You can bump this up a little bit probably. Dig a hole continuously. You can keep it if you want to plug it later, or you can just put some putty in there and yeah, there's multiple ways to fix that if you wanted to. So we'll go ahead and say add a hole, and I can put one here, and that'll put a hole in here. We'll hide one in here if we wanted to. You know, put holes wherever you want that makes sense. You don't want to do just one. So in fact, what I am going to do is, you want to be probably a little more strategic than I'm being. We'll go ahead and we'll put one here and here and here. And then we'll go in here and, you know, we'll select all. We'll go in here to supports. And we have medium selected. Depending on the scale we're printing at, sometimes light is okay. Heavy I rarely use. I'll just kind of spot use heavy. Here you can see these are all the areas that are at the bottom. And then as you're going through and you're seeing the slices, you'll start seeing little islands appear. So like, you know, as you're going through here, do I have it? I don't have a ton on here. There we go. There's one over here. So this, as you're printing out, you're going to see, oh, this little island appears. You definitely want a support for that. So you can go in here and you can manually create a support, or you can say plus all. That'll go through and add supports where you need them, and then parent them and bracket them. And then you can go through here. You can kind of spot check anything you want. You can add more supports. You can delete some of these, whatever you want to do. But now you're good to go. And then you can say, go back here, slice. So it'll go through and essentially just generate the images that you need that's going to send to the printer. And then you can save this out as a CTB file, and that's what you send over to the printer, and then it'll go through. It's basically a bunch of images that sends a printer, and it also has this information here, which is your machine. So you have the build plate size, and then also your print information. So the bottom exposure time is going to be longer. That's going to be your raft. Oh, speaking of, these kind of have, it's kind of an auto raft. It's just kind of based on the shape of the object, and you go through here, and it's a lot easier to peel these off rather than printing directly. You know, a big fat, you know, shell right onto your build plate. You don't want to have to take a really hard tool to that. Okay, so there's that. Let's go in here to File, New. And now, so we've got our head. And this one is a little more picky. One thing we can try to do in ZBrush, because we're batting almost 0. When it comes in red, that means there's hole problems. You can go into ZBrush and you can select something, and you can go down here to Geometry, Mesh Integrity, Fix Mesh, and then Geometry Modify Topology, Close Holes, and then you can try re-exporting, so that'll fix any weird issues you might have. You can also, in here, just select any one of these. I think I do have an auto arrange in here. There we go. You can just select something and say repair the model, and it'll go through and repair what it needs. Generally speaking, it does a pretty good job repairing. Sometimes it'll find something where it's like, I just can't repair this. I haven't had a real issue with like, hey, I couldn't repair it. It still prints fine. Probably not best practices, something you want to do. But I don't know, something to keep in mind. So again, exact same rules apply as far as going through and rotating your object around, so we can, and you also, what you basically want to do too, I didn't mention this, is minimize your footprint. So as you're printing, you don't want huge areas of white that are going to stick to the FEP and then have a hard time peeling off, and then they'll pull off the build plate, and then it'll just sit as a little glob, and it'll just be a terrible broken print. So again, we'll just kind of move these into place, and this one has hotkeys for this, which I love. So again, the weapon, I feel like inside the hand is probably our safest bet here, and then here we'll just rotate this around, and I'll play it fast and loose, and I can always go back in and modify. Okay, so here we can say, as we're arranging are moving, we can say, okay, they're all sitting on the platform, right? However, if I'm ready, I can hop over here into prepare. I don't think there's anything else. You can also do magic, which will go through and do all of the steps. You can go in here to, actually, I should mention this. YouTube playlists. Right here, Lychee Slicer full playlist. I don't have all the new features. I haven't really been keeping up with like doing videos as things come out, but they have videos on their own channel, which is totally awesome. But if you want an introduction to like, here's your 3D printing setup and then going through the steps, all the options, I'll put that there. Best way to scope close up to bring the mesh from Marvelous Designer. ZBrushing or polygrouping by UVs is helpful, and then ZBrushing based on those polygroups, and then projecting your detail back, and then having subdivision history is one way. I don't know if that's the best way, but that's what I usually end up doing. You can also try using proxy pose for dynamic simulation. Let me write that down. I want to try that in just a second. Transpose master merge the subtools, then you can proxy pose there, or is that bad? No, you can. You can definitely transpose master like your high res is over and then proxy pose everything all at once. And then move it around and then go out of proxy pose and then send it back over. Absolutely. In fact, you can transpose master. I should have mentioned this in the videos. Transpose master, proxy pose, export that to another program, set up like Maya Human IK, pose it out however you want, import that back because your vertex order won't have changed. That'll update your transpose master proxy pose. Then you can send that back over and update your subtools. Yeah, totally. Cool. How long does it take to print it? So it'll usually tell you the estimated 3D printing time. Once I'm done setting this up, it'll tell me. But the only thing I've noticed that really increases your print time. So here we have a 3D printer that we're using, and then here's the settings. So basically, if you change this, the layer thickness is set at half a mil or 50 microns, basically, I think. So 50 microns or 0.05 millimeters is the default layer height. I did do a couple tests where I dropped this down to like 0.3. And I don't know, like with also it kind of depends on as far as like when you're printing at scale and then layer height, and then also you got to remember the anti-aliasing properties. Like, I don't know, there's so many weird little things, and also the type of resin you're using. There's a lot of weird factors that go into that I haven't played around with a lot. So someone smarter than me would have to tell you about all that stuff. But if you leave it at the defaults, this wouldn't take any time at all to print, maybe 3 hours max, I would assume. Though of course, the bigger, if you're doing a print size that takes up, goes all the way up here, like a Eiffel Tower or something, it's going to have to print all those layers all the way up. And then of course you got to make sure that your base is strong enough to support everything past this. So there's physics involved, and also the art and science that I am not that great at, but I would say 3 hours if I had to guess. And you can also, if you wanted to play around with these settings, if you wanted to see if you can make it go a little faster, you can change the lift speed, the retract speed, the lift distance. You can see if like, hey, if I drop this down to 4 millimeters instead of 5, that'll save me some time. Lift speed, I can crank that up a little bit. Of course, the more you play with these settings, you're risking being a little too fast or not far enough to get off the FEP, and then the next thing you know, you've got destroyed prints. So I don't know. You can probably speed it up even more. You just have to practice or have someone else do it and steal their settings, which you can also do in here. When you go set up your printer, you can go through here and you can add new resins, and you can look through what other people have done and their success rate, and just kind of steal what they have. So it's all doable. ZBrush 70, way to check on your scale. We're working on my stuff always ends up microscopic or gigantic. Yes, there is a scale built in. In fact, we go out of solo mode here. By default, the default unit scale in ZBrush, this is a new feature, is in millimeters, I believe. So if we go in here to preferences, so basically what I did is I have W And then if I do Y, this is always on by default as your gizmo. If you hit Y on your keyboard, that goes into transpose mode, and you can measure with your transpose. Or you could set up a file, a scene file with like a banana, a pin, and a can of Coke that you can bring in and append as subtools, and just have them sitting there, keeping you, oriented. But as far as measuring in here, and again, I'm not super great at this. I need to get better at it, but so I can't just jump through here like I normally do. So transpose units, the unit scale set to 1 major tick, and then 10 minor ticks. Although I don't know how. Let's go in here. So Z plugin, there is you can update your size ratios, check your mesh volumes in here. You can also go in here to scale master, and we can say set scene scale, and right now 1 2 3 4 1 2 3, it's almost 4 millimeters. Oh, the head itself is only 1 and only 2. Okay, that makes sense. So right now we are at millimeter scale. If you wanted to change this to inches or something, you could do that, or centimeters. So now right now for the head, if you go to the bottom to the top, it is 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 0.1, 2, 3, 0.4 millimeters. So this is 0.1 millimeters, and then this is the major ticks are the millimeters. So if you wanted to scale all these up, might even actually be better to bring in or create a helper cube, which you can do here under scale master. You can say, hey, give me, you can also update in here. So you can change your set scene scale, slider subtool size. I need to go back and rewatch the videos on this. I think Joseph Drust has a video on this. In fact, click scale master, click this button, Google Chrome, sure. There we go. Scale master will take you right to the video, and that'll explain everything for that. And I need to rewatch it myself. But yes, having said that, if you did go in here, one of the new features in 2023.1 is if you do go in here and say set scene scale, and you're like, I'm working in inches, so you can go in here and say, okay, give it to me in, so it's 1.5 inches. There you go. So now I've reset my scene scale, and in my preferences transpose units, it's recalibrated these to actually be set to inches. So now this is 1 inch, 2 inches, and a little bit, and all these minor ticks are 1/4 inches. So now you can measure in inches and 1/4 inches, and it works just fine. So now you can go through here and measure, and then make sure you're working, and then when you export, it should be correct. So we've got all this, and you probably want to save as you're working, but I don't think I'm doing anything crazy. So we're going to go in here to prepare, and one of the first things we're going to do is go through here. For example, I think we have everything selected here, and you can go through here and you can turn objects off and do all sorts of cool stuff in here, enable or disable hollowing at the same time. But I'm going to go in here to hollow first, and we're going to say hollowing 3D. And in fact, I'm just going to select the body for now and talk about this. So the thickness, you can make this whatever. I'll say maybe 2 millimeters. Quality, I'm going to crank it all the way up. Then we're going to say add hollowing. There we go. So now as I slice through the body, you'll see it's nice and hollow. And two things, it's going to use less resin. And also, it will allow you to have less of a overall footprint to kind of stick to your FEP, so it'll make it a little bit easier to peel off because the footprint isn't that big. I should probably rotate this down a little bit. That's fine. So now that we've done that, we can you can also do hollowing 2D, but we're not going to do that. What's next? Oh, supports. So we'll go in here to supports, and you know what? Let's go over here to utilities. I'm going to raise everything up by raise this up by 5 millimeters, so you can select all and raise them up. So I'm going to get it off the build plate by 5 millimeters. And then if you want to go in here to manual, you can go through here, and I'm going to choose medium for now. You can literally go through here and just drag and support them. So if you want to do a line, just go drag all the way down. And once you've done that, like so, and in fact, if you go in here to manual, you can, so the distance between as we're dragging, you could even set this up to have it be pressure based. So You can have it go from light, medium to heavy based on your pressure, or the interval could go broad, so more space between them, the less space between them based on your pressure sensitivity. The interval is set to 2 millimeters, so in between here it's every 2 millimeters we'll set this. And then once you've done this, you can go through here, and in fact, one excellent example, and this is so crazy. Let me show you this. Here's my generic plate. I'm just going to put this in here real quick. Now this one is way too big. I need to redo the scale on this one. But if I go through here and I say scale, and then say fit to bed, and then, you know, we'll scale this down. So I'm going to print out. Oh, another cool thing too is if you want to measure in here, you can click measure, and then you can just click and then click, and it'll tell you how much it is. And then you can actually, I believe you can go in here and scale based on, you know, it's like, okay, from this point to this point has to be however many millimeters, 8 millimeters. You can go in here and type in 8, and then it'll scale it down to make sure that distance is exactly 8 millimeters. Super useful, probably for somebody. So now this one here, I've got this, and I want to go through, and if you, again, we'll say prepare support, and we'll raise it here. You can see if we go to the bottom, this is all the area that is facing downwards towards the build plate. You probably need to be supported. Super easy, and this works out astoundingly well. Go through here and just make a line of these things, like so, and then you can go in here and you can say, what are we doing? We're doing manual, sorry. You can parent some of these to kind of optimize them a little bit. You can put in bracings to make sure that they're, you know, nice and structurally supported. And I forgot to even put a raft on here. You can go in here to raft, and you can say, hey, you know, all sorts of rafts that you want to build. So as I'm going through here, you can see the different raft types it can create. I usually just do the shape one over here. I totally forgot to do that, and it still managed to, I should have taken a picture of it. It printed fine, both of these things with all these little tiny points just holding it. It printed great. So I don't play it safe, put a raft on there, but I forgot to do that. So there's that. This is all about creating manual, and of course you can just go in here and create manual as much as you want. You can also go in here and say, you know what, let me just select all these and delete them, and we'll go back into supports, and we'll say auto. So we'll do auto supports. At this scale, medium might be overkill. You might want to stick with light, but we'll just do medium for now. And then we'll say generate automatic supports. It'll look at your object, and it'll also generate internal supports as well. So and it'll parent and brace them. So as we're slicing through our object here, you'll see little internal supports showing up there. It'll add little mini supports where it needs. I don't think there's anything major in here. However, when we were out here doing hollow, something I forgot, there's a suction cup detector. So we've added hollowing. If we search selected, this will tell you where you might have little suction cup areas. And in fact, the entire middle section is a suction cup area because we haven't dug any holes yet. Duh. So let's go in here to hollow holes. Right now that's set to 2 millimeters diameter and then going 3 millimeters in. So if I go through here and I just put a hole here, and I'll put a hole here, I'm just putting them at the bottom of the key registrations basically. And then put a hole here, and then right at the bottom. In fact, I'm stupid. I should have done this before. So we can see a little bit better. Oh yeah, and then we're hollowing holes. And the other cool thing about the Pro is if I click in here and I hit the space bar, I can go through here and I can just scale this on the fly. I can make the penetration go further on the fly. Super duper easy to use. And then we can say, okay, I've added holes to this. Go ahead and search if I have any suction cup areas. And I have less suction cup areas. You can go through and you can create blockers. So here's the blocker area. You can put in big shapes in here that'll block this area from being hollowed. So you don't have to deal with the suction cup. Although this one, let me see if I can't. I'm just gonna try. So ideally you basically don't want any of this yellow showing up. I don't know that it'll be a huge problem in this case, but just something to keep in mind. So there's that. Oh, and then supports too are cool because same thing as when we were doing So here we are just kind of creating supports. You can go through here and you can look for the islands yourself. It's like, oh, there's an island. I want to put a support there. And on any one of these, you can go through here and say, hey, I want it to be heavy, medium, light. And you can also hit the space bar. You can go through here and you can move this stuff around. You can also do mini supports. So you can all the shortcuts are right down here. So like Control Alt, I can tap here and then tap here, and that'll do a mini support. You can do a light, medium, or heavy mini support. So if you wanted, I need to talk about this too. Sorry, I'm not prepared to talk about this, but I'll muddle my way through it. We'll go here to manual. Oh, we'll go here to island, and let's do this. Let's say we went through and we did a fairly good job at setting this up, and I'm just going to have auto do it for us here. After we're done with that, we can double check our work, and we can go in here to island, and we can say search selected. And that'll go through, and remember when we were kind of scrolling over and looking for little points that need to be supported, those little islands, it'll go through and do that for us. Sometimes it clusters them around holes, which is kind of a pain. So you can actually go through there. Oh, there's only 3. So we can hit show, and we can literally just go through here, and it'll take us right to them. So for example, there's an island right here. So instead of going through here and saying, let's go to light support, putting a support in here that goes all the way to the bottom, you can go through here and you can hold down Alt and then click and drag, and you can attach it here. And then if for some reason there's like little miniature islands, this is where you can say Control Alt and tap, go from here to here. Let's switch it to light, and then you can do like little fan supports. You can actually do little rudimentary bracings if you want to go through here and just Control Alt here to Control Alt here and say medium or whatever. Very useful, and again, you can hit spacebar on the last one you chose, and you can go through here and modify it as needed. So anything you go in here, hit spacebar, and you can modify any point of this object. In move, scale, and rotate as well, if you want to scale this up or scale it down. Very robust functionality. So island detector. Sorry, I just lost all my islands. Blah, 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 blah. Wait for it. And it's on detailed now. You can actually put it up to it'll go through the actual pixels of your object. So let's say show. So this one here, we'll say, let's say light, Control Alt here, you know what, instead of that, let's say we want to just do Alt with light. So there's the island. We'll Alt tap there, and you can also just look for the red. But anyway, you get the idea. So once you're done doing all of that, now here's what it's going to look like as it's slicing through, and then you can just go in here to the export section. And again, this is the scale we're printing at, just to kind of reorient ourselves in space. Here's a simulator that'll show you. Here's the resin vat, and there's your FEP, and it's going to go lift up, boop, and then finish printing. And then you pop them off, and then you clean it up. Yay! Yes, we'll talk about clothes. Go to create the attachments for the little arms and head, the little cubes that connect the pieces. Yeah, the supports, should be, just the manual creation here, and then just going in here and just adding the supports, and then again, Control Alt, and then once you've done that, you can parent these, brace these, just by going in here and parenting these together, and then bracing them and whatever, just to save yourself some resin time. Cool, no problem. So let's talk about, that was one thing I wanted to try. So, for example, let's bring in our trusty, okay, what were we recording? We were recording 2023.1. There we go. Something nice and simple. And again, this miniature actually printed, I lost all that detail. I didn't even care. It didn't matter. It's awesome. So here we have this object, and we're going to go in here to proxy pose, and that will make this so it's a lot easier to work with. Again, just providing an envelope for us to go through and modify. One of the things we can do is, if we want to turn him into like a bearskin rug, I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to rotate him around, hit Y. There we go. Rotate him here, and then maybe I want to lift his head up a little bit. We could put a Z-sphere rig in here, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. So here, we're just going to kind of lightly modify. And he's got a real severe hunchback, so this is probably stressing him quite a bit as far as, oh my gosh, come on, getting him to lay flat. So we've turned him into a, oops, we definitely don't want to Dynamesh. Turn that off. And then we're going to say, go out of proxy pose, all our high res geometry will follow along. However, we want them to kind of flatten out, right? So we're going to say, we have a floor, and that's automatically by default going to, because we have draw elevation set to -1, wherever the lowest part of your subtool is, that's where it's going to put the floor. Useful for most situations. So we have a floor here. So if we go in here to dynamics, we can simulate this. Obviously I can't simulate, you know, 760,000. We can crank this up and try, and it will probably do it, but I want to do a proxy simulation. I just want to simulate fewer points and have these points follow it along. You could ZBrush project and then simulate your lowest subdivision level, but instead of doing that, we could go in here, and again, we could just hit simple proxy pose, and again, you can dial this in. You can go lower or higher depending on how much detail you want as you're simulating, and that's especially important with cloth. If we proxy pose at a very low res, our wrinkles are going to be huge, right? So if we go through here and we say BTC, which is transpose cloth, as we're transposing and it's colliding with the floor, it'll go through here and create fairly large wrinkles. We could even wrinkle it this way. Boing, boing, boing. You know, we're deforming this as a cloth type object, and then when we hop out of proxy pose, all his high res will follow, and then he'll be a little weird cloth guy. However, if we go out of proxy pose and we say, you know, keep more details, now our wrinkles will be a little bit finer. So when we go in here, and again, we don't have to use transpose cloth. We can say gravity turned on, run the simulation, and it'll just collide, and you're going to see the wrinkle. Oh boy, the wrinkles are a lot smaller. Let's do this, BTC. So you can use your proxy pose resolution to dial in your wrinkle fidelity. And in this case, I think I want a little bit, like a little bit lower. I think that might be good. Yeah, so now we're getting some nice secondary sized wrinkles as I smash them into the ground. What else? What else? Oh, another brush cloth hook, BCK. You can go through here and you can use cloth deformations like this. And you can also turn on thick skin. So if you wanted to go in here to like thick skin, turn that on. Now it'll only deform to a certain depth amount, and it actually looks like I'm kind of pulling skin across a, like just kind of rubbing his skin around, right? And of course you can make that thick skin more or less, and it'll give you a visual representation of how deep or how not deep it's going. So here it is a little bit less. So again, we're just kind of pulling wrinkles across his skin in the proxy pose form. And then when we hop out of proxy pose, we'll just get some secondary form changes there. And this is actually where subdivision history comes in handy, because you can go to subdivision level 1, do big wrinkles, go to subdivision level 2, do medium wrinkles, go to subdivision level 3, do fine wrinkles, and it's fairly easy. And this one you'd have to jump in and out of proxy pose at different resolutions. What was the question? Oh yeah, sculpting clothes have to bring a mesh back from Marvelous Thunder. I think I have a video on that. Let's see. Or maybe it's not very up to date. Oops. That's everybody's Marvelous Designer. I want my Marvelous Designer. Oh, here's how you can use UVs to go and make patterns. Use your UVs as patterns in Marvelous Designer. And then I think we go back into ZBrush here, although I don't think I keep the polygroups when I come back. Patterns. Yeah, I just do ZBrush and project. I don't keep the polygroups, but you can keep the polygroups from your UVs and use that. Is useful. Yeah, this is a good video. I think this will answer basically essentially how I usually end up working, give or take, the Marvelous Designer. Oh, quick way to create attachments to the arms and the head, the little cubes. Sorry, that's key registration. I misread that. You know, there's models you can buy. Let's say I wanted to have, not that I would do this because sliding this in with a key registration under the fingers wouldn't work, but just to show you, let's say I want to just do real quick. I'm going to go into my custom menu. It's just basically attaching a cube right here. And of course you can buy or you can create a whole IMM brush of different registration types you want to put in here. So I'm going to put a little cube in here. I'm going to mask this area, and we want it easier to pull out. So I'm going to go to unmesh my center, and I'm going to scale this. Oops. Go to BTR, not transpose cloth. Scale this in. So there we've got our registration point. And then I want to copy that over to the hand. So I'm going to hold down Shift to the gun. Alt tap the hand, Shift, put this down at the bottom. Just show these two. So now, if I have the gun as a subtractive mesh, we turn on my Boolean, you'll see it's going to punch in this. Oops. The gun has this on it. It'll stick right in there, and the hand has this on it. And turn off solo. There we go. And that'll punch in there. One thing to consider though is tolerances. Like right now, if I printed these both out as separate objects, there's a chance that this might be a little too small to accept the other side of this. So to hedge our bets a little bit, and also you can see this in action here. If I go into regular, you can see there's space around here. And you got to remember the scale we're working at. I think I changed it to inches, but or did it go back to millimeters? I don't remember what we were working at here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, this is inches. So this is, I mean, sorry for everybody not in America, but or the other country that uses inches. Here is like a 1/4 inch. So this is like not even a 1/16 of an inch, probably. I don't know. That's very, very small distance. So just to kind of reorient yourself in space. But anyway, speaking of, if we go through here and it's like, okay, this is already been inflated, but I'll show you how I would do that. So basically, I want to use this as my subtractive mesh, but I want this key registration to go on here. I want this key registration to stay the same, so I'm going to duplicate this off and use this. Let's move this up one, and we'll turn this off. This gun is good. This gun I'm going to use as my Boolean subtractive object. I'm going to modify it a bit. So one way I'm going to modify it is I'm going to go through here, grab this cube here, hit W, and I'm going to say, hold down Alt and just pull along here, and that's going to fatten it up a little bit. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to push it out a little bit, and it's going to fatten it up in the Z direction. And then if I Control Shift drag, I can go through here and I'm going to just do a slight inflate. So I can inflate this however much I want. And now I have a fat version of this to Boolean out. So now I'm going to set this as subtractive. And we're going to go out of solo mode. And now I know that this is a little bigger, this is a little bigger, and everything will kind of fit in there with whatever tolerance. And again, I wouldn't do a key registration here because sliding this in, it's obviously not going to slide in back to that key registration. So this is a terrible example. Don't do this. I'm just showing you as an example. Now at this point, what I would do is say W. Oh, I messed that up. Sorry. Oh, this is my inflate. So forgot. We're not done yet. So if I'm like, okay, I'm happy with this hand. This is exactly what I want for the Boolean. The gun's good to go. This fatter version of this is what's cutting out. So now I'm going to go in here to Subtool, Boolean, make Boolean mesh, and now I've got, it'll stick it out here and nowhere. But I'm going to say append this last one. So here's my good hand. So I'm going to say this hand I don't need. Delete. This gun I don't need because that's just my inflated proxy. Here's my good gun, here's my good hand, and now the gun should fit in there. And now if I go in here, we turn off live Boolean. This has the key registration, and this has the key registration. Remember though, on this one, hit W, go in here and say remesh by union so that it sticks all of these things together, and you don't have to resort to Dynamesh or anything. It'll just mesh these so they're all part of the same object. And be airtight, which again, if we go in here and say cube here, and subtractive, and W, live Boolean, we can test our slices. Sorry, there we go. We can go and look. Everything cool, no surprises. Yay, nice and clean. Cool. Wrapping a cloth or something like a bandage around an arm. What you could do is you could, in Marvel's Designer, there's the ability to save an avatar in an avatar state. So when you import, it'll actually animate over time. So you could animate your arm rolling over time, and then you could have it simulate a wrap around the arm. It's a pain in the butt. usually what I'll do is, there's got to be something, I've done this so many times. Let me see, straps. I usually fake it. Bootstrap techniques. Not really, huh? I usually do something like this. Like for the Ninja Turtle specifically, it's like, oh, I want straps. I'm gonna go through here, slice, polyframe, Control Shift, spacebar, brush radius, and then just put some straps along here, isolate them. You know, I'll grab all three of these. Delete hidden, grab these, delete hidden, zero mesh half, dot size down to 0, keep group, smooth groups down to 0. Give me some straps here, and in fact, I might even go in here and say polish by features, open circle, tap that a couple times just to straighten those out. In fact, we can straighten those out a lot, I bet. There we go. Zero mesh half, zero mesh half. You can split these out into their own subtools if you want to. We can do insert. I'm going to say you, and you are straps. We'll say insert here. So here's my 3 different straps. I'm going to say split hidden, Q mesh, polygroup all, and then now we have our straps. And you may be thinking, well, it's not a wrap. Well, that's where the cheating comes in. Oops, I deleted the body. Sorry. Where I go through here and say here and here and merge, and then I would just go in here with like turn off back face, auto masking, topological, maybe 1.5, and go in through here and make it look like wraps. It'll take me 5 minutes to make a bunch of, you know, strappy things. Say crease PG, crease level of 2, smooth sub of 3, and call it a day, as opposed to trying to, I guess my other option would maybe be to be like, I don't have a, you can go in here and create an IMM brush, or you can like helix geometry so it actually wraps. But boy, you'd have to really play around with this. Like maybe even change your S divides way down, so then you could wrap this object. Let's say group by normals, isolate just the blue, delete hidden. So yeah, you could have this wrap around your object, and then go through here and kind of make these things more wrappy, and fit it to your object a little bit better using deformers maybe. But rarely have I had to do something like that. Of course, I'm not doing anything super hyper realistic or where anybody's going to really be paying attention to any wraps, so I can usually get away with it. Workday consists if you work a lot, you only work a few hours in a day. I'm a discipline director, so director of character art. I'm also an art director on a project, so a project art director, and I also do IC work on that project, and I also do Elugu Mars 3 Pro videos, and I also do What's New ZBrush videos, and I also do live streaming and any incidental work. So my work hours stay pretty consistent all day, every day. Burnout City, for sure. Yeah, I use metric system more now that I do 3D printing, but yeah, freedom units. Cool, excellent. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks everybody. Sorry about Twitch. I don't know how to fix that. I'll look into it, but yeah, have a good rest of your week. And